Divine Rise. We know we said 9:45, but had to create another video. It's in my story. Divine Rise, blessed be to your day. May it be everything you require to create everything that you desire. Got two thoughts, and then I'm gonna reiterate the question that I asked yesterday. I posted yesterday. Two thoughts. The root chakra, the root. For the ladies, fellas, if you're using product in your hair or whatever. But when it came time for you to get the relaxer, the perm out, you were going back to your natural look. First thing you had to do was address the root. First thing you had to do was address your roots. If your edges came out, first thing you had to do was address the roots. If your beard was patchy, you had to address the root. You had to learn your support system. One thing that I've learned in my going deeper into my work and becoming the full authenticity that is me, Papa Lucifer, if you ready to go further, was until I understood what my roots were based in, I could not expand past the comfort zone of survival. Until I understood what true support in that aspect of balance and acceptance and being vulnerable and being able to be open and honest with myself, I couldn't receive support and I couldn't give support. It's all based on what we are rooted in. And that leads me to the question. Do you know what mental codependency is? I touched up on it in the podcast when we were talking about, we broke down the imitation of flattery, that imitation concept. And I got even deeper into it when we were talking about what is your life without the emotional cues. And I wanted to get a little deeper when it's coming into that mental codependency in your root chakra. Your root chakra, if you don't know, is based in how you survive or how you grow. And how you used to survive will be detrimental to how you thrive. How you used to survive is detrimental to how you thrive. When we think about our root chakra and how we root, what we're rooted in, sometimes in staying tethered and not grounded. Grounded is truly being rooted into something or into a space based on support that is full of the nutrients based on my growth, rather than being tethered and I'm rotting inside of that space. So one of the biggest questions that I always ask based on mental codependency is rooting or rotting. Mental codependency is under the thought process of the things that are the unseen, the things that I've not dealt with, the things that I don't talk about, the things that I don't deal with. Those become my projections or my markers in how my emotions are filtered out, how I see things. If you find yourself, these are some good key facts to see if you're stuck within a mental codependency inside of your mind. One of the biggest ones is, real nigga, I'm trying to be independent. I have to be for everything. I gotta be for I gotta make everything fit. I'm what everybody. I'm what everybody needs. Some of these things are keys to understanding that if you have that mental dependency. And the key to getting into understanding our roots, our shadow, is getting into that shadow. Think about it like this. If you are always in fear of shining, in fear of stepping out of your comfort zone, in fear of stepping up, and you always feel like someone's trying to talk something about you or throw shade, it's only your shadow coming out to the surface. Shade, shadow. Think shade and shadow. If you're afraid, or if you're always trying to react to people, I don't like people throwing shade at me or throwing them sneak disses, it's only your shadow coming to the surface. It's the shade that you're keeping that nice little box, your nice little Pandora's box, locked up to where no one can get to it. Go read the book, The Alchemist. Go get the book, The Alchemist. It tells us the story of, the story of The Alchemist is the protagonist. He went all the way across the world, finding all these challenges and all these problems and all of these issues, and along his way, and then he was told to go back to the tree that he was sitting under, and that's where everything he needed in order to tap into himself. Go get the book, The Alchemist. That's the story of you when you're inside of your space. As long as we do not deal with the unseen and understand our roots, everything that grows from our tree, everything that grows from us in that space, the root chakra being red, you got to think about how that root chakra affects every other aspect. So if I'm rooted in survival, I'm rooted in fear, I have deeply rooted traumas that are based in everything from mom and dad not being there to daddy and mommy being there too much. In those aspects, that means everything that's rooted in is going to affect my confidence, is going to affect how I use my power, is going to affect how I use my power, is going to affect how I freely give out my power, it's going to affect the path of my heart, it's going to affect how I speak, it's going to affect based on what I see, based on what I see, because I'm projecting what I see, is based on that mental codependency, based on that thought. It's that mental codependency. This is that mental codependency. I'm no longer dependent upon my past thoughts, the past actions, the past thoughts, holding on to this. I'm going to hold on to this, and I will remember this. I'm going to remember that. I'm going to remember this. I'm going to remember you said that. I'm going to remember you said that. I remember the first time someone said, I'm going to remember you said that. And I looked at him and I was like, good. Remember it. I remember coming out of that show, Grand Rising. I remember coming out of that show because that mental dependency is when you're dependent upon those memories, the repressed memory, even though you're not talking about it, that fear that if you start to shine or you start to expand, that's what's going to come up. If I come out, if I'm not blessings, if I'm not dealing with, if I bring that to the surface, what are they going to think about me? If I tell this part of my story that's not what are they going to think about me? They're going to not like me. They're not going to accept me. They're going to treat me with kid gloves. They're going to treat me like I'm weak. This is all of your inner child speaking. That's the survival. Your inner child still trying to survive. Your root chakra, that's where your inner child, everything that your inner child is rooted in, and everything that you do based on survival. Your productivity, your efficiency, your ability to build, your ability to prioritize, your ability to set your boundaries is all based in if you're rooting or if you're rotting. I've talked about it before with that polarization. When we think about that polarization and we compartmentalize our lives, and then we feel like that's the boundary. If you find yourself compartmentalizing your life a lot. I remember finding myself compartmentalizing my life a lot. That means I was always trying to put equal amounts of energy into every space. I was trying to give equal amounts of energy to every space because it served a purpose. The purpose that it served was it gave me my charge. It gave me my charge. It gave me my charge. So if at that point in time, if I needed the value of support, it came at always a higher interest rate or a higher price based on how I was surviving. I thought it was normal. I thought it was normal to sit there in a space where because I didn't know my energy, therefore I didn't know the energy inside of that space. My detriment to survive, the identity for me to survive. I have to be seen this way. I have to talk this way. I got to act this way. But in reality, most of the things, almost 90% of the things that I was frequently doing to maintain in this sense of relevancy, when I really started going internal, I was like, I don't like none of this shit. I don't even know where I picked that up from. Mannerisms, changing my accent, changing my voice. I had a whole fear of letting my voice be this deep. Had a whole fear. Because when my voice got deep, because of the trauma, because of the traumatic events, not speaking up for myself, not setting my boundaries, every time that I spoke up, I sound angry, which was right. I only thought that my voice needed to be this deep when I was angry. This is that compartmentalization in that root, in your roots, in that root chakra process, based on survival. If I get loud, then everybody will back, and I can keep compartmentalizing. See, yeah, everybody's scared. No, they weren't scared. They were following suit. They were just following suit. Everything in your space follows suit to your rhythm, to the energy you put into the space. When we think about how we give our power away, I remember so many times I would always say some of these things, and I said this up to about 2.5 years ago. And this is how I learned support. I learned what my support system was, and still rocking and love my support systems. The true aspects of no expectancy and being able to go into a space when you're in a true sense of support. Go look at the Bobby Hemmett lecture when he talks about the aspects of love. It's being able to bring honor to your thought into that space. You can't do that based in survival. When you're thinking about survival, you're thinking about attachment. You're thinking about how can I stay attached? So I remember a lot of times inside of my space, based on the roots of how I was raised and what I saw every single Friday, my pops give his check to my mom and he trusted her to do the bill thing. But since she had no financial literacy or emotional literacy with her emotional literacy, and my pops didn't never learn or see the nurturing of financial literacy, naturally inside of that space, when my mom fucked up, when my mom messed up or was not being responsible or taking accountability for how she was doing her day to day, it just gave my pops a reason to stay within. It fed from a space of where my pops remembered from his grandmother. His grandmother. His grandmother rocked him, like every check that came to my pop's house that was for him, that his dad would send to the house, his grandmother would have him signing off the back of the check. And so he was stuck in a survival mode. So the space that I came through was based in survival mode on top of that. So I was rooted in, that's just 2 generations of survival. That's not even going further back to how that came into place, going into that shadow, and then how further going back, how that came into that space. And then looking at how my mother was and how she was, what she was rooted in, that came into my shadow. So that's one generation. And the way that I had to understand both of these parts, and I remember when somebody said to me, was like, you act just like your mom. And I would try to punch them in the mouth. You act just like your pops. I would try to fight to try to prove, to survive in the identity I created in that space. But guess how I won? Guess how I learned and got through it? To accept it. I had to get past the point of they're trying to say things to hurt me, because that was only my inner child speaking. My inner child was still trying to survive. It's still like it was getting that attention. That was the only way that I knew how to get attention, was based in that conflict. That conflict was based on my internal conflict. I was rooted in the conflict between survival and expanding, learning and staying the same, keeping the same behavior. That's that internal conflict. So if I'm naturally in internal conflict within myself, I'm not dealing with my unseen aspects. And that's the surface level. I'm not dealing with my unseen aspects. Then everything in my world is going to match the unseen aspects. So I can think. So in my mind, I'm rotting because I'm not growing in anything. Now I'm searching outside of myself for things to keep me rotting. I'm stuck in the physical aspects, rotting, depreciation. Think about it like this. Everything external depreciates the moment that you take it out of the box. The moment that you drive a car off the lot, it starts to depreciate. You can't even get that depreciated value because you have no sense of ownership to what you did. You did it based on, ooh, I needed this. The moment that you take whatever it is, the moment that you take that apple from that tree, that fruit from that tree, that strawberry from that vine, it starts to depreciate and die. So are you rooting or are you rotting? The roots that you started with, if they were based in survival, then in order for me to learn love and support, guess what I got to do? I got to assess was that love or was that survival? I got to go through and comb through all of my shadows. I got to go back into those generations. It's easy to get distracted, or it's easy to omit it. Well, nah, it ain't their fault. Because if it's not their fault, then it's not your fault. You see how that works? You keep going back because it wasn't their fault, it was their fault. So that's your past. We talked about that past, present, and future in the same continuum. It wasn't, your mother's not accepting blame. Your mother's not accepting. So now in your space, in order for you to keep that energy flowing, because that's the energy that's feeding you, now you're in a space of not accepting things. Now you're in the space of avoiding things. So now you'll sit there and be like, damn, I am like my mother in some ways. Damn, I am like my pops in some ways. What is this feeling that I'm feeling? Yes. Everything's the same at that core. Everything that you came through on your soul, in that soul contract that you came down through, that spectrum is what built you. That spectrum is what created the roots, created how you grew, created how you came into this space. You not dealing with those unseen aspects? That's what's creating your space. That's what's tilling and bringing your space into this, keeping you doing the same thing. That behavior. You're wondering why you keep behaving the same way. You wondering why you keep following this same pattern. It's your unseen. It's your undealt with. It's your unhealed aspects. It's your shadow. It's the aspects inside of your shadow that is keeping you in that sense of rooting. Remember, With too much shade, you'll rot. Think about it. With too much shade, you'll rot. With too much light, you'll burn up. It's about that aspect of your balance. With too much shade, you'll rot. Because you ain't getting enough, you ain't bringing enough light to the situation. And with too much light, you'll burn out. Because you're not bringing the balance of your dark into the situation. I want you to look at what you're rooted in. I want you to take this good day, win the day. You got to understand the night before. I want you to look at the original rooting, where you're rooted in survival. I want you to think about that mental codependency. Are you depending on the old thought process in order to maintain the behavior? Are you doing things based on reaction and not really building a plan? That's the base of mental dependency. If you cannot go without it for longer than 72 hours, you have some type of mental codependency. It's time to get to those roots. Without this, I can't survive. Without this, I can't survive. Without that, I can't survive. Without that, I can't. It's time to stop telling yourself that. It's time to start going deep. It's time to go in. It's time to go in. Everything outside of you is going to change based on that, naturally. Everything outside of that's going to change naturally based on what you're rooted in. It's time to come in. It's time to come in. It's time to tap into that aspect. What are you rooted in? What is your entire perception and perspective of your life rooted in? Is it based in survival? I never want to go back and do that again. I never want to go back to being this. I never want to go back to being that. I never want to go back to being this. So now you give yourself that illusion, that mental codependency, and now you create within your space things that you can't live without. Everything outside of you is only a conduit of your mental capacity. So if my mind's within codependency because of my traumas and the roots and the avoidance and the rejection wounds and the childhood traumas and my uncles and the things that I saw, and I'm not dealing with those things, those are the things that are going to be created inside of my space. Everything down here is working for you. Everything down here works for you. It's time to take ownership. It's time to own your story. This week on the God Hour podcast, we got into that compelling assumption. It's available everywhere. Spotify, iTunes, Breaker, Apple Podcasts, Anchor Podcasts, everywhere. Tap into that. I desire you to be the best. I desire you to become into the best authentic self for you. I desire you to really embrace what it is to really, you don't love yourself until you know yourself. Not just the parts that make you shine and light up. Talking about those parts that are in that dark aspect. Those things you're not dealing with. Those things you are only running away from, but it's always on your toes. I'm still right. Yeah. I want you to be the best. Until I learned what my support system was rooted in, I couldn't provide or receive support on the mental level, the emotional level, definitely my spiritual level, or my physical level. When I would receive things, I would, due to those lack of boundaries that I was rooted in surviving, I didn't have understand boundaries. So I would leave myself falsely open. That's that mental codependency. I left myself falsely open. I put out more than I knew that I had. That's that emotional account. That's that emotional literacy. I was always overdrawing my account to keep everybody balanced. As I've always said before, it's time to stop. As long as you're a liability to yourself, you're an asset to others. Once you start understanding why it's important for you to become the authentic asset, you become a liability to others. They're not going to be able to tap in the way they used to tap in. Everything's meant to help you grow. Everything's going to take you to that next level. It's up to you. You're in the right position. What you going to do with it? I love you. We love us. Ashe.